As a young person, I like to think that we live in a pretty progressive society. I like to believe that we are making steps towards a better future and treating everyone with the equality that they deserve and with the ideals that this nation was founded upon. While I think we're doing a good job of this, sometimes as a society we kind of get our wheels stuck metaphorically in the mud, and instead of moving forward and getting unstuck, we kind of just spin our wheels. And one of those things, one of those issues that is not necessarily in the light is the blood donation policy as it is regarding to homosexual men versus heterosexual men and women. And you might say, why is this relevant to me? Well, the blood supply is something that affects all of us. It may not affect you when you're healthy, but if you need surgery or if you have hemophilia or something like that, you might need a blood transfusion, and then it affects you. Changes there in the 1980s, in 1983 to be exact, there was a ban placed that no gay male was allowed to donate blood. And this was during a time when not a lot was understood about AIDS, and people like Ryan White were getting infected via blood transfusions. So it made sense. Since then, the ban has been slightly altered, which is a step in the right direction, but it's not quite where we need to be. So we're going to discuss the old policy, the new policy, and why this affects us as a society, and why maybe we should think about changing it. AIDS in the 80s, and they really called it AIDS because they didn't know about HIV quite yet, was a big deal. People were scared, and a lot of their fears were not necessarily based in fact. People thought that you could get AIDS from a toilet seat. They didn't want their kids attending kids with other people who had AIDS because they thought that they were going to contract the disease just by using the same water fountain as someone, which we know today to be not true. So in 1983, the FDA approved a ban on all gay men donating blood, which, like I've already previously stated, really came about with some really famous cases of people getting infected via blood transfusion. And in that time, there was really no way to accurately test the blood for AIDS until it was already too late. And so that policy did kind of make sense at the time. About 6 months ago, the policy was changed to where gay men are allowed to donate blood. But if they have been sexually active with anyone in the previous year, they're ineligible. So while this is a good step forward, heterosexual men and women are not subject to the same year ban on celibacy, unless they've exhibited certain risk behaviors or had multiple partners. So even if a man or woman is with the same partner for a long period of time and gets infected with AIDS and doesn't know it, they're not subject to the same screening, and so they could potentially taint the blood supply. And in her New York Times article, Sabrina Tavernisi says that the FDA has proposed this year-long ban because they, quote, "There's no scientific evidence to prove that a shorter than a year ban is safe." And this really is a problem because without the public really knowing it, we are eliminating a lot of potential donors. Last year in 2014, there was a blood supply shortage, and people don't really hear about these things, but the FDA was having issues with blood supply. And the new rule added 317,000, could potentially add 317,000 pints of blood to the supply. But that year-long celibacy is still excluding 3.5% of the American population, which could more than double that number if they were allowed to donate, which could potentially save millions of lives, according to Cheryl Weinstein of the Washington Post. Italy has they have a policy that their policy is that they have a private screening process for each individual in order to ascertain that risk behavior without just blanket not including people. And since they have passed this measure, they have not increased any reports or had any extra reports of blood-to-blood blood transfusion infections. So that's really, really awesome, and we start to wonder why the U.S. doesn't do something like that. Mike Cooper of the CDC, he is an author for the AIDS Weekly column that goes out to like everyone in the CDC, and he has actually been quoted as saying that scientists support this type of screening process, and they also support, they are widely in support of doing blood tests for first-time donors, which would pretty much eliminate the problem. So when you're kind of confronted with the facts of this, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. This was kind of a temporary solution that was placed in the 80s to kind of stop this public fear when there was not really any scientific way to test the blood effectively. Today, a blood test can detect whether someone has been infected with the virus up as early as 7 days after they were infected. So there's not really any reason for these people to be not allowed to donate blood. And what really sticks out to me, and what I think sticks out to a lot of people, is there's not equal restrictions. Just because you identify with a certain group of people, that doesn't make your behavior any riskier. It really, there are solutions to this, such as Italy's policy to privately screen individuals for these risky type behaviors. And maybe the U.S. should require a blood test to all first-time donors, where most of the donations in the blood supply are subject to a blood test by the CDC anyway. And not to mention that eliminating donors basically is just detrimental to the health of our country. It's really important that we make sure that we are doing what's best for our people and being healthy. So, in conclusion, we have made a big step forward, but we are, like I said before in the opening, spinning our wheels. And this does, whether you want to believe it or not, it affects everyone. Next time you donate blood, maybe you should realize that just because you get to donate blood doesn't mean that that's a privilege that everyone has, basically just because of a lifestyle choice. And are we really putting out a good message to younger people of the gay community that just because they are gay, that maybe that's some kind of risky behavior? And I think we should really strive to make the right step forward towards that equality that we're all promised. Thank you.